What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. So basically, one of the major ways that or there are some studies that have come out, or not recently, but have been something that's been studied, I guess, rather frequently in the past, was basically how the Treasury yield curve can predict recessions. It's definitely interesting, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it. So we're just going to go straight into an article, um, going about it. Go straight to the screen share here. Okay. So basically, this recession indicator is flashing a warning sign. Right. So basically, this is something called a yield curve inversion, right? So at the long end of the curve, or the longer end, for longer duration treasuries are paying a lower interest rate than in the front run, right? So like interest rates are a good way to think about interest rates are the price of actually borrowing the money. It's the price of the money itself, which means it's the price of risk, right? And so the more risk in something or if you're lending money to someone or a business or whatever, and you view them as risky, you're going to charge them more interest, right? Because they're more risky. So you want a higher compensation for taking on that risk. And so basically, an inverted yield curve is a signal, and in this case for treasury yield curves, are for the treasury yield curve. When it becomes inverted, it's a signal that investors are more nervous about the immediate future than longer term, right? So this means like short-term duration bonds are pay higher interest than longer term, right? And so basically, and all this is kind of happening, and they say that the treasury curve hasn't actually inverted. I think it has actually. Wait, when was this? One second, I need to want a date on this. March 26th. So that was past Saturday. Um, if you watch the Rebel Capitalist channel here on YouTube by George Gammon, he talks about the yield curve a lot because this is something he's been looking at, and also Emil Kalinowski and Jeff Snyder and UW University, they've been talking about it for a while, and they had this one called the Retching Cat. I think it was kind of I think it was supposed to be like a comical thing with like the curve itself looks like a retching cat, but I don't remember. I think it was a Treasury curve. It could have been the Euro-dollar curve, so I might be wrong on that one. But basically, the argument is, and there have been like actual studies done by economists that I think by the Federal Reserve too, specifically, in which like they've measured the predicting power of this Treasury curve inversion, and there was one of them that it was like 100% accurate, and then there was another one to where it was like it was still accurate. Like I think the actual study dealt with like the 10-year and the 3-month treasury. So like when 3-month duration notes are let me restate that. So when treasuries, it basically comparing the yields, and then in the case of an inversion, it'd be the interest rate paid by a treasury with 3 months left to maturity is higher than that of a 10-year note, right? Um, and this is all happening when the Fed's talking about hiking rates. They did one, it was 25 basis points earlier this week, I believe, or I guess last week. Um, anyways, but a lot of the ones that people bring up is the 10-year to the 2-year, which I think is the one that George Gammon talks about a lot on his channel, is the 10-year to the 2-year. And according to this, the spread is sitting around 0.2%, where a year ago it was 1.5, according to this article. And that's been changing kind of on a day-to-day basis. It keeps getting like closer and closer over time. And essentially, according to this too, it's a yield curve inversion has preceded every single recession since 1955. according to the research from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. So yeah, if this is true, then I was right in what I said earlier. But an important thing to note is this doesn't mean it's immediate, right? It does take time, right? It's just kind of it's a precursor. And so, like in the example of the GFC, or like 2007 to 2009, the Great Recession, the curve inverted in 2005. So it took around 2 years for it to actually invert. But it's just something to kind of keep in mind, and it's a small little indicator that kind of helps, because it's one of those. I've seen a lot of people argue that, like the fixed income, like the bond market and stuff, that's the smart money, right? And so you can see a lot of people put a lot of predictive power into that market. And I think there's definitely some merit to that. I haven't studied it too much to give like a definitive, I think it's going to predict everything, right? No, I'm not saying that at all. I haven't looked into it too much, but that's something that I've been looking into a lot more recently. Just because it's something I never really understood. I've never been a huge paper asset guy, and so like bonds and stocks weren't really my thing. But it's something I've been looking more into. Just kind of, one, it's interesting, and two, I kind of have the mathematical background for it. The whole the Black-Scholes model and stuff like that for derivatives, or for specifically for options pricing, and stuff like that. The math behind it, I'm familiar with because of my physics background, but still, it's definitely something to keep in mind. There's multiple indicators, right? You could also look at like the 10-year and the 7-year, I think, was brought up in one of the podcast episodes. But it's definitely something to pay attention to. And when it does invert, nothing says it's 100% probability. Obviously, because all this stuff is a game of probabilities, especially since they said, we'll get right to it, but when the return on the 10-year note is lower than the 2-year, that indicates pessimistic outlook on the part of investors and reluctance to their money. And this was basically, this preceded every single recession since 1955, right? And so that is 70 years almost, 73, 72. Or wait, math. Anyways, almost 70. I think I went the wrong way. But yeah, I lost my train of thought again. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I will predict the next one. Not with 100% certainty. But by the fact that it's preceded every recession for I don't know if there's much of a base of an argument, I guess, because you could bring that up that, just because it can take a few years. Now, was the treasury curve inversion really an indicator, or was it kind of it happened, say like the treasury curve inverts and then we have a recession 10 years later? Would we say that there's really a causation there? I don't know. But if it's in with like 12 months, or I guess even 2 years, because like in the grand scheme of things, is 2 years really that long of a time in terms of like whole like economic output or just the economy in general? Not really. Things are kind of relative, so it's definitely something to think about. And now that I think about it, it definitely needs some more thought and study on, which is kind of the point of these videos and everything else. So I pretty much just wanted to bring it up, talk about it a bit, just because, one, it's interesting, two, a lot of very smart people are using this kind of stuff. And so I think that if you want to have any form of if you want to make any form of intelligent decisions within, whether it's investing or business or whatever, or anything that involves kind of a macroeconomic outlook to where that's important, it's definitely something to pay attention to and at least be aware of, which is kind of the reason why I wanted to make the video on it. But anyways, that's all I got for this one. So I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you on the next one.